Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show. And if you're joining for the first time, this is part of our digital transformation series for which we meet every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. We pick one topic related to digital transformation. And for this year, we have been talking about the KPI topics. And for today, we have KPIs for inventory managers. Before we dive into the topic, we are going to start with everybody's intros. I am going to start with my quick intro. If you don't know me, Sam Gupta, principal at Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm. And on that note, I am going to move to Chris, if he's okay.
I'm okay, Sam. Thank you. Hi, Chris Gherardini, president and owner of Turnkey Technologies. Been in the ERP space for 35 years. Again, we represent Microsoft Dynamics. So looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Chris. And Sharon, I'm actually going to move to you next because you really represent inventory, and inventory manager is your topic, right? So go for it.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Happy to be here. I'm Sharon Custer. I'm inventory optimization consultant. Help e-commerce owners to increase their cash flow and the profitability.
Okay, amazing. And you are probably going to be testing everybody's knowledge today. So thank you so much for being here, Sharon. Okay, amazing. Mark, can I move to you next for your intro, if you don't mind?
Sure, Sam. Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Keynes. I am the president and founder of BlueLink ERP. We are the developer and implementer of the BlueLink ERP software, and love this topic because pretty much all of our customers and all of my experience in like 30-something years has been with inventory-based businesses.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Mark. Tom, can I ask you to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Thanks, Sam. And hello, everyone. My name is Tom Rodden. I am an IT consultant and a longtime IT professional. From 2017 to 2022, I was CIO at Varian Medical Systems. Prior to that, in a previous life, it seems, I was the director of logistics for GE Lighting, and part of that responsibility was inventory management, as well as production planning and warehouse management. So this is also near and dear to my heart and brings back a lot of memories. So looking forward to the conversation.
Amazing. So seems like we have real experience here today in the forum. Thank you so much for being here, Tom. Paul, can I ask you to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Paul Vragel, founder and president of For a Better Business, also been around 35 plus years. We are implementation-driven operations consultants, and that includes full scope of the business, front end all the way through. The three things that motivate us and our clients are developing buying to change in a day, implement, not just recommend, and rapid results.
In a day. Amazing. Thank you so much, for Paul, for that. So, all right. So we'll start with the topic. This is going to be inventory manager. And Chris, I'm going to start with you. Inventory manager is a very interesting role because you could have many different definitions. I mean, I've heard materials manager, I guess, S&OP manager, warehouse manager, sort of sometimes, could be together as well. I don't know if you have heard of anything else in terms of the role. So we are first going to define, where
Sure.
inventory manager role fits in. And then once we have defined the role, then we'll talk about different industries
Sure.
as well as KPIs that you have seen.
Sure, I appreciate it, Sam. So, as I look at inventory management and you think about the person sitting behind the desk, what's the focus? And org size and industry are going to have variables on that. I think org sizes, but I try to categorize, even as I look at intelligence around inventory management, as metrics that influence or, define how is customer service versus the capital side of the equation. Like, okay, am I taking care of my customers or am I wasting money? And I think there's a couple perspectives there as you start drilling down into the KPIs that could exist below that. So those are the two categories. I was trying to think, is there a third? Money, customer service. Okay, so again, if you think about money and capital side of inventory metrics, and again, these are they being visited every day? There's other ones that are probably more current, more daily, to forward looking, to make sure that, again, customer service stays where it is. Are you losing my internet?
A little bit, but you are still audible. Let's go on.
Can you? Anyway,
Keep going, Chris.
Yeah. All right. Maybe I was the one with the internet problem. But to that, on the capital side, as you look at metric, we think about mins and maxes, and we think about, okay, well, how much capital do I have in inventory? How much is sitting there, right? And as we look at a min and a max, people could express the amount of capital that I would have in my building at a max. If everything's at the max, how much capital is that? At the min, how much capital is that? So there's a capital conversation. As we look at metrics that support the mins and max being accurate, right? We're looking at turnover. Right? Hey, man, that thing's been at the max forever. We never reorder it. Well, maybe we do math on what's the supply on hand. I had a company that had 270 years of supply. So again, as you look at capital, and these are capital rated metrics, and some of that is turnover, some of it's the ABC analysis. What's that mean? Okay, I got 20% of my stuff that's not moving. So we go back to capital, we go back to cost-based analysis. We're consuming warehouse space. There is a carrying cost for inventory sitting there. So certainly the analytics that are looking at how well is my capital being used in the inventory space. So there's a few more over there, but like I said, in just a couple I'll mention, not to steal all of them, but is on the customer service side. Again, you're looking at fill rate. Well, that's a big one. How's my fill rate? And fill rate tells you a lot, right? Am I stocking the right things? Am I stocking the right levels? But fill rate is an indicator for customer service, right? Are they getting one order, two orders, one order with everything in there? And I can keep going. Like I said, I have a whole handful of these things, but I thought it'd be fair to start with the two macro concepts. Thoughts?
Yeah, amazing. And when I look at the inventory, I think it's all about capacity planning. And one thing I can tell you based on this streaming experience is StreamYard does not know how to plan its capacity. So obviously they are feeling they don't really have any sort of KPIs. On that note, I'm going to have one follow-up question, Chris, for you. Maybe define some of the KPIs. So turnover, I know you have mentioned. Some of the listeners that are going to be in the show, they sort of know it. They might not know it. They might have read definition, drill down, maybe talk about some of the stories that you have seen. What is it?
And so mathematically, as you look at, and this is my opinion, right? I'm a services industry guy, but in the inventory and you look at the turnover metric, it's like, okay, how quickly, meaning if we're turning it, it's a better use of capital as you look at the peaks and the valleys. So if you took a sinus wave and you looked at these peaks and valleys, you're like, all right, how well am I performing within that? And I think, other examples are, how many POs you issue. This same company that had the 270 years of supply was issuing about 300 POs a year to the vendor. So again, as you look at frequencies of replenishment, you look at how big are my bins. And again, we're using this model of the whole warehouse to figure out how much stock, am I keeping the right stock, the wrong stock? If I have too much of this stock, it's the wrong stock. I don't have room for that stock. So turnover kind of gives you a good health indicator on inventory movements. And I think as well as just refreshing the capital. I mean, that's my assessment of it. I'm sure I'll have other opinions, but at a macro level. So I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I do. Thank you so much, Chris, for that. Sharon, I'm coming over to you. And, one of the things that when I look at the inventory is probably the first thing that is going to be really cross-functional in the enterprise, okay? And if they don't really have those cross-functional processes figured out, and sometimes people don't even understand what inventory really is, because when you look at the inventory, because there is going to be a financial value, then you are looking at sort of the number, and then you are dividing. And if your computation is not going to be right, if valuation is not going to be right, your inventory is probably not going to be right either, right? You might have some random numbers, but sometimes they might help you from the operations perspective, but from financial perspective, you might probably still fail. So it's a very, very, very interesting metric. And typically when we are dealing with any of the operational issues, one of the first thing that typically comes in is always going to be inventory that they have. They just don't know where the inventory is. Let's say $500,000 or $1 million or a couple of $1 million. They just don't have any traceability, any visibility. Somehow that money is sitting somewhere and they just don't know where that is. So Sharon, over to you, whatever you have seen from the KPI perspective in the real world, what works, what does not work.
Thank you, Sam. First of all, I would say when an inventory manager look at the inventory, it has to think about the time, opportunity cost, and the value of the inventory. And echo to what Chris said, that we need to look at ABC analysis. What is ABC analysis? Is basically a list of product that probably is the 20%, top 20% of your profit from, or cash flow is from, or quantity is from. B list is something that is already there. It's consistently sell almost the same, but it's a good sales, but it's not a top performer. The C1, this ABC, the C level inventory is the lowest one. Like it could be slow moving inventory, or even dead inventory. So those are the categories that you are looking at. But nonetheless, those are the things you need to look at when you're looking at the inventory turnover, the demand focus accuracy, all those factors that we need to focus on. ABC different levels, what they do to you, how you use those numbers to improve your profitability and cash flow from those analysis. So that's just what I'm saying, just echo what added on what Chris said. In addition, when you look at inventory KPI, you need to look at the financial side. And from the financial side, it's not just the numbers. You have to look at your cost, opportunity cost, and your time. So those are the very, very missing part that business often miss, like the lead time. What does that really mean when you have a longer lead time? That means that you have to put out more capital to make the business operating running. Wait until your inventory comes in, right? And your space, what is the cost of running the warehouse, the inventory carry cost? So that something that is sitting there for 1 year, you can use that space to put something that actually moving. So that another thing that we need to pay attention is the inventory damage you're missing. Like those are the things like a sporage, how quick the vegetable gone, you cannot sell it, or things like that. Those are the details that you need to pay attention. It will, if you don't pay attention, those waste will drain your cash quickly and without you even noticed it.
Yeah, so very interesting insight. So I think I definitely want you to touch a little bit more on the opportunity cost. And I don't know if listeners are going to be familiar with how opportunity cost is going to be related with the inventory. In general, when people look at the opportunity cost, they are probably going to look at, opportunity cost of a person, labor. If you are doing something, then, you could have done differently, right? So that's where the opportunity cost comes in. But here, are you talking about really the cash lockup that you have in the inventory and what you could do? So maybe clarify some more there, on the opportunity cost, Sharon.
Opportunity cost has a lot of things to do with it.
Yeah.
It's just when you're doing things, you need to look at it as like, if I have option A or option B, which way is a better way, right? For example, you may think about invest, I don't know, scan gun, like put on your hand to scan quicker so you can pack and count your inventory quicker. And they cost maybe $1,000 a month, just have that whole system or whatever. But that's the opportunity cost. If you can save a labor, like a person, you have to have a person to scan it, to count it anyway. So do you want a person to count one item with 1 second? Or do you want the person to count one item with 5 seconds? That's a 5 times difference that you pay 5 times of that person's salary to complete a task, if that makes sense, right? Another thing is the opportunity cost could be, let me think, what else is there? The lead time, like if you buy things from China or things buy from India, the lead time, which one's longer? if 10 days longer, what does that really mean to you? Is that you have to put out $100,000 more cash to carry that through? I mean, you're not wasting that $100,000, but you have to put out that cash to grow that business if you're willing to.
Yeah, great insights. Thank you so much, Sharon, for that. So, Mark, coming over to you, and I'm pretty sure you are going to have a lot of stories, as you always do. So, I'm not going to pose any questions here. Okay. Go ahead and share your stories or whatever you want to share related to KPIs.
Okay, probably only one story this time around, but I'll get to it in a moment. But yeah, I just wanted to sort of drill in a little bit more into what Chris and Sharon have said, and then maybe focus on one area. So, I mean, Chris kind of nailed it right up front. Different size companies, different industries, different roles. What is an inventory manager? Is a warehouse manager your inventory manager, etc., will determine what kind of KPIs should be important. But I think there are, and like clearly, like let's say a small e-commerce fulfillment company will have completely different inventory KPIs than a large B2B equipment distributor, for example. But there will be some commonality, but even how you read them would be different. I mean, even just take, for example, inventory turnover, one of the most commonly cited, and in my view, largely misused ratios or KPIs, particularly used by finance people. And remember, I used to be an accountant, so I'm not bad-mouthing anybody that I didn't used to be. But inventory turnover ratio means very different things if you're selling equipment and having to stock spare parts, and you have to keep them in stock because, even if they stay for a long time, versus if you're a food distributor, perishable food distributor, where, inventory turnover is almost a non-factor because everything goes before date. So you've actually got a slight variation on that, which is your lot traceability kind of derivatives. But I think, there is one thing that is fairly common to all non-perishable product-based companies. And I'm not talking about manufacturers, because manufacturing is a whole different ballgame with dealing with, the availability of raw materials and production projections. But generally speaking, with distributors, wholesalers, and e-commerce companies selling non-perishable goods, and Sharon definitely alluded to it, so did Chris, dead stock. It's one of the most, particularly in the smaller to medium-sized owner-managed sector, it's one of the least cared about and most poorly handled factor. And you also got to realize that some KPIs or some business metrics have to be read in conjunction with one another. So one of the examples that I always like to throw out is your back order KPIs need to be looked at together with your dead stock KPIs. Do you need to keep so much stuff in stock that you never have back orders, that you're actually losing money on the fact that you can fill every order? And it's very different. If you're a B2C e-commerce retailer, you have to have enough stock in. You have to have accurate stock. You can't sell stuff you can't deliver. But on the other hand, if you're a wholesaler or distributor, the opportunity cost, as Sharon's shared with us, of things like keeping stuff in your warehouse that's taking up shelf space, that you're paying rent for, that's getting in the way of your pickers and packers while they're trying to pick and pack, and your team that are receiving and putting away inbound inventory, is usually ignored, and it's potentially very, very large. So, I mean, I think that dead stock KPIs and metrics are one of the more important areas. And one of my favorite reports, which I almost never see being used, is really an inventory activity and profitability ranking report. So imagine a report that ranks your products that you have currently in inventory, but it ranks them top to bottom based on their dollar value and percentage contribution to gross margin in descending order, and gives you cumulatively the cumulative gross margin and the cumulative percentage of the cost of inventory. So what you have is your your gross margin is going from 0 and going up, and your inventory cost is going from 0 and going up. What that effectively tells you, so the example that I'll give you, the story I'll give you, is a fairly large $60-70 million a year distributor of pretty complex equipment and machinery. We did that exercise, and we discovered that 90% of their gross margin for the period that was relevant to them, which was 18 months because of the cycle of replenishment of some of the spare parts in their industry, we hit the 90% threshold of gross margin, and we had used, I've got my notes here, 32% of the inventory. So what that means is 68% of the money that you've got tied up in inventory contributed 10% of your gross margin. Think about that. Now, obviously, there are some things that you have to keep in stock. So I always tend to look at these things and say, we'll use Clint Eastwood, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So this is where you should cue the music from the movie, Sam, but we'll let you off the hook.
Yeah, we should definitely. Go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the good would be that 90%, the 32% of inventory that generated 90% of gross margin. That's probably the good. The bad would be the product in the lower part of that report that you have to keep in stock to a certain degree because you've got to have spare parts available on demand, for customers when there's warranty issues and things like that. The ugly, which in their case worked out to about $4.2 million worth of inventory, is stuff that you should just fire sale. Just get rid of it, get it out there. And I mean, just a little side anecdote on that is the reason they had so much dead inventory, so much ugly, was because the owner was very much a fan of when my suppliers have a special offer or a fire sale or whatever, I'll buy as much as I can because one day I'll be able to sell it. So there were products that had been sitting there for like 12 years. Oh, one day I'll sell it. No, you won't. So sorry, I've been rambling on a little, but I have a few other things which we can get to later about KPIs, but I just wanted to share that one with you about dead stock because it is, I'm going to say almost 100% of the customers that I go into have more dead stock than they should have, and they don't know it.
Yeah, could not agree more, Mark. And I mean, before I ask a question, if you have more to share, maybe go on, and I'll ask my questions later, I guess.
well, I guess the only other thing is, like, as I was thinking about this, actually, just as I was thinking about this about an hour ago, it kind of struck me that, and you hit the nail, you nailed this with your very first question. You said, "What is an inventory manager?" So I was trying to think, KPIs. In terms of inventory management, more so maybe than any other KPIs, or at least as much as any others, they tend to traverse the different disciplines. So, for example, is a customer satisfaction index an inventory KPI? Well, it very much could be, even though you wouldn't traditionally think of that, right? Your gross margin and profitability metrics, are they sales or are they inventory? They're inventory. So I think inventory KPIs, the ones that are going to be important are going to be based on your role, what it is you are trying to manage, and what you can control. So that's where, again, we've discussed this before in these KPI shows. You can have way too many KPIs. You can have a dashboard with 50 KPIs. Don't waste your time. Rather go watch a movie. You'll get more business productivity out of it. But trying to nail down what are those 3, 5, 7 KPIs that are really meaningful to me, that'll actually help me improve my company, my job, my department, whatever. Those are going to be very, very specific to your company, your business, and your role. And they may not at first glance actually be directly attributable to your role as inventory manager, but you've got to take a more broad view about what is this shortage of inventory or this surplus of inventory, what other areas does it impact in the business?
Okay, amazing insights there, and love the story, Mark. Thank you so much for that. So, Tom, I know you are probably making a lot of notes there as well, and you're probably going to have material for an hour. So I'll save my questions, and if you want to go with your notes and whatever you want to share about KPIs.
Sure, Sam. I will try not to wax quite so eloquent, but I did momentarily glance to my left and look for the good, the bad, and the ugly music. I was going to open my little piece with that, so Mark would feel like he was really recognized for his contribution there. So, but I didn't have enough time to really get it, so you'll have to dub it in, Sam. But I think everything I've heard is spot on so far, and I could add some more metrics that I have seen or used. And that might be interesting. But, as I was listening and thinking about this, I was also thinking that a big part of the challenge that I faced, certainly when I was at GE and leading the logistics supply chain function for the lighting business, and was trying to drive behaviors, not just measure things, right? It was about how you actually make an impact with KPIs. And so I kind of was scratching a few notes, as you saw, Sam, saying, I had 7 steps, right? Which is too many, but I had 7 steps. And I said, first there's the math. You can come up with a formula for a lot of these metrics. And even that, there's science and there's art to even the math, because what do you include? What do you exclude from inventory? Is it finished goods only? Does it include WIP and raw materials? What about, quality hold, and what about this and what about that, right? And so there can be debates just on the math, like what's in and what's out and what's the time frame. I remember in GE there were lots of games with KPIs and metrics on even turns, where people said, if it's a quarterly or semi-annual snapshot that we use to measure the inventory level, then I can be all out of whack. I can have way more inventory during the non-measured period, but just by quarter end, I got to drive it down so that I get a good low number and my turns number looks good. Was that the average through the quarter? No, but it was a beginning quarter, end quarter, quarter by quarter snapshot. So there's really critical math questions that need to be addressed in order to have good quality data, really representative data. So with my team, I ended up doing something weekly. You can't manipulate it weekly. That would just be insane. So there are ways to do the math that make sense and maybe allow for less integrity. So I think that's one consideration. And I don't want to go into that any more than that. But to me, that's kind of step one is the math. Step two, I think Chris touched on early on, was the appropriateness for the business, right? KPIs for a service business and KPIs for a heavy manufactured goods business and all kinds of different industries and businesses. Some make sense, some don't. And certainly if you try to set benchmarks or targets, come up with benchmarks or set targets, those have to be appropriate as well. So I think there's that as well. What's the math, and is it even a relevant, appropriate metric for your business? Number two, a big one we haven't touched on was data availability. And a lot of times we talk about IT, and I'm now for many years an IT guy. So it's one thing to say, here's the formula. It's another thing to say, I can collect that data and deliver the metric in a timely, meaningful way. So that has to be considered as well. Sometimes it can be hard to collect some of this data. So that was my third item. The fourth was, even if you manage all that, and I think Mark touched on this, there's the interpretation of the data, the metric, the KPI. Like we talked about, turns is a classic, right? Not only can it be manipulated if you don't have a rigorous process for taking those points in time and doing the calculation in a way that's really reliable. But in addition to that, let's just say you are consistently high on inventory turns. What does that actually mean? And Mark kind of said, yeah, you have to sometimes pair metrics together. If you got a high stock out frequency or a low fill rate on first time ship, you probably are out of stock a lot or holding too little inventory, and your turns are going to look great, but that's not good customer service. And probably your financial numbers are not going to be good. You're not going to have customer loyalty and so on. So these need to be interpreted carefully as well. So that was kind of my number four. And then I got into what I was really thinking about in my opening was just alignment with your team. When I was doing inventory management at GE, I had a team of 6 inventory managers reporting to me. They had various product lines. There was the fluorescent guy. There was the halogen guy. There was the incandescent guy, and so on, right? So we had, there was the automotive guy. We had all different kinds of lamps and lighting fixtures, and each product line, I was measuring performance with the managers of those different product lines. But I really wanted to have their buy-in on this, and I ended up creating a dashboard, which is another thing that Mark brought up. I ended up creating a dashboard, which I basically said, okay, we're going to measure you on 3 things. We're going to measure you on fill rate. We're going to measure you on turns, and we're going to measure you on stock outs. And we're going to weight these things. I can't remember what it was, 20, 40, 40 or something. And I'm going to publish the scorecard every month. And we're going to have a prize every month for the person with the highest score, the best performance And this wasn't published to the world, but this was published within our group. And I used it actually for the annual reviews as well. So, you won the award 6 times out of 12 months, Scott. So, you did a fantastic job. But that was really driving behavior. Like, people would meet with me and say, I got to figure out a way, you need to help me meet with some people in sales in order for me to maybe make some improvements in my turns, because, and this goes to kind of my 5th point, I think it would be, the cross-functional nature, right? It's one thing to manage your own team, but, you get led down paths where you say, well, if sales is out there selling deals which demand that we consign a bunch of inventory to our customers so they don't pay until they consume it, and it's sitting on our books and it's in our inventory, and they're writing these contracts and the customers love it, and that's all great, but Tom's measuring his managers 40% on turns, and that's hammering their turns number. They're putting out all this extra inventory into the field, and the customers are saying it's your contractual obligation, GE, you got to provide this stuff, and whether it turns fast or slow, that's not our problem. You committed to having X number of units at site for us at any point in time. So again, the cross-functional nature of some of this stuff, we need to partner and go beyond the 4 walls of our department and actually make metrics that work for the business and not just for a department. And I think that's like all of my points there, whatever it was, 5, 6. But the last part really of that little speech there, Sam and team, was about how do you get this to be adopted and get the alignment departmentally and even cross-functionally, and make behavior change or drive behaviors and not just measure stuff, because ultimately that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to impact the business and drive certain behaviors.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tom, for that. So I really want to touch on the lighting, space, because the inventory that you have in that space, it's so complex, and I don't know whether you guys have dealt in that space or not. It's phenomenal the way the inventory works. But the follow-up question that I'm going to have, Tom, for you is going to be related to fundamentals, and you started your segment with the fundamentals of the inventory. And one of the things that nobody has spoken about so far is going to be definition of SKUs. Okay, in manufacturing, manufacturers are lucky because they already have their SKUs figured out. Maybe engineers are doing that. Distributors are probably lucky as well because manufacturers are sort of providing them. But when you get into these gray areas where SKUs are not defined, I have seen paragraphs written in these SKU numbers, and obviously that is going to impact everything else, right? So that sort of goes back to your comment. So I don't know if you are going to have more follow-up comment, Tom. I'll give you one more chance.
Well, I mean, it kind of goes to the maybe the very first point that I was making about the math and definitions, right? And I think all of our guests here today are well aware of the challenges sometimes, right? You really do have to understand the nature of the business in order to apply these metrics, the nature of the products, right? Is this a highly configurable product? Is it mostly WIP and raw materials, and you do a lot of very quick final packaging, and you don't hold a lot of finished goods? What is the nature of the inventory and the business and the products or services potentially that you're dealing with before you say, I can just take a metric or a KPI off the shelf and this will work for my business? I think there has to be a considerable amount of thought, and SKUs would be part of that. If you want to do a units-based measurement, if you want to get down to product specifics, one of the things I tried to drive unsuccessfully at GE when I was there in the lighting business, I had proposed that we introduce a different kind of ABC, activity-based costing. I wanted to actually start measuring, our shipments of fluorescent tubes differently than our shipments and handling and management and cost estimating for halogen lamps. Halogen lamps would be high value, very small, lightweight products, easy to store, easy to pick, cheap to ship, right? That would be, the ideal product. And then the tubes tended to be lower value compared to a halogen lamp, much more, space intensive, taking up a lot of room, actually more fragile, more breakage, more disputes with customers. So I was proposing, if you really want to understand the inventory situation, you really got to get to maybe more activity-based costing. If we're leasing space, how much of the cost of that is driven by the fluorescent tubes versus the little halogen lamps? If you're talking about labor, how much of the picking activity and forklift driving and so on and so forth is being driven by the giant fluorescent pallets and products than the tiny little halogen lamps? How much of the transportation cost and et cetera, is being driven by the types of products? If you want to start to look at what's our profitability on a product line basis, don't just take value or don't just take units. I mean, let's actually consider the nature of the product. So I still believe that that's a very powerful way to approach business in general and inventory management in particular. But it's challenging to implement. You have to be quite committed to get that kind. But if you establish those kind of one-time cost estimates for what it takes to handle this product, store this product, ship this product, then you can crank out the numbers on an ongoing basis. But I think that's very, very critical that you understand your business, your products, your supply chain processes to the point where you could, come up with good metrics, appropriate metrics, even activity-based costing type metrics.
Could not agree more. Thank you so much, Tom, for that. So, Paul, I'm coming over to you, and you are going to have a lot of notes as well. So I'll, pause for my questions and go for it, man.
Okay, I'm actually going to start with a story. The cuts across all the functions is really, it's absolutely critical. And I'll just say, so we had a engagement with a company. It was in private equity. They had never done inventory in the life of the company. Never. All the material, they had an ERP system which had been configured by a division that they shut down, and then they fired all those people. So you know what that looks like. All the material is in A1A in the ERP system. 10% of the warehouse is labeled. The rest is just piles of stuff. They got about a 60% first run quality issue. They happen to be running, it's all paper. Okay.
How long have they been in business, Paul? And are they still?
The owner was a wizard. Specialty chemical business. His deal was buy low, off spec, out on the market, produce it, but it's a recipe business, right? But well, we don't really have any of that. Okay, don't do that process. Add some heat here, use this other product to add in, and it'll be close enough because I know this guy over here really needs it and he'll pay a premium, even though this is off spec. His view of inventory was, why do we need to run inventory? I know what's here. And in going through this and kind of early in the stage of getting this resolved, one of the managers came up with a new inventory category that would help us a lot. And that inventory category was lost. Because they always lost stuff, but eventually they would find it, and then they could just back it out of lost, and everything would be good. So they had no material allocation process. So you could have 6 orders, and it's all on that material. The material had expirations on it, and there was some food-related bacteria things. I mean, this is just now let's talk about KPIs in that environment. The whole issue, what we really had to do was literally build a visual twin of the whole company, front to back, top to bottom, and go through every aspect that was contributing to, and in terms of metrics, everything was driven. Oh, and by the way, they were at 50% on-time delivery, 50. So we basically drove everything back from that one metric. Because if we don't get that metric right, then we're out of business, right? But everything drove every action that we took. So once we have the visual twin, we can link all of those actions to how is this contributing to visual twin. And it was literally everything. It was personnel, it was training, it was how they looked at or didn't look at orders. So the other aspect, just a couple things, and I support what everybody said about all of the things that matter. This was all of that rolled up in one place. The other thing to be careful of is there's a short phrase that says, figures lie and liars figure. And you certainly need to be careful of that. And I mean, related to that is if you set out a metric and decide that your staff is going to be graded on that metric, you can be very sure that if push came to shove between what is good for the company and what is good for their metric, there's a big push for their metric. So it's just, I mean, you need to be cautious of that. One-sided metrics are particularly difficult in that regard. If you don't have some countervailing thing that says, maximize this subject to this, you aggravate that situation regarding the metrics. So getting to all of the details, and we haven't talked about yet, how does it go into inventory and how does it come out of inventory, and how do the things that get made, but part of it has to go back into inventory, or you get a container of returns with no identification in it. Now what? How do you get that stuff analyzed, assessed? Is it good material? Is it not good material? And back into inventory. It's if you want complexity, inventory is a wonderful area to work.
Yeah, could not agree more, Paul. And I know that, Tom is slightly shocked with the comment related to never done inventory and how long they have been in business, and he deals at the enterprise level, right? So for him, there are always going to be processes. But, when you go to SMB space, it's wild, wild west. I have seen it all the way you are describing, to be honest. People don't even understand what not doing inventory mean. So maybe you want to clarify that. What does it mean of doing the inventory? Because I don't know if a lot of businesses know that, to be honest. So Paul, go ahead, describe that.
Yeah, so part of that was, so I had the CFO who's saying, I want to do inventory. I mean, he's CFO of a company that's never done inventory. And I want to do inventory. I said, great. We can do inventory today, and then in 2 weeks, we can do it again. Because all the data that we got is no longer accurate because we're not allocating. It's all in paper. We don't know 2 weeks later what we actually shipped in terms of the inventory. So it's entertaining, I guess. At that, but so the CFO keeps pushing. Eventually, we got to a point. He said, "I have to do inventory by the end of the year." I said, "Well, okay. So when do you want to do this?" He said, 3 weeks. Okay. Warehouse has 10% of the locations labeled. We've all of the things that I mentioned before, but we had enough process in. So I said to him, "Okay, we could do inventory. When do you want to do that? We could do inventory. We'd get a reasonable result. When do you want to do that?" 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, with no prior planning at all, zero. Just this is a new concept for them that we could have an inventory. And by the way, we did it 3 weeks from flag drop. So, I mean, your comment about in the SMB world, you can see just about anything. We did a survey of the fast ship area, which by its name you would think, okay. I ran a little contest. No, there was no prize other than the pride of finding. I said, okay, go through the fast ship area, and I want to hear what is the oldest expired product that's in that area. And the oldest one was 10 years past its expiration date. What's the metric that deals with it? And again, what we had to do is drive everything off of on-time delivery. And so we did process and execution, got them to 87%. Then we added a technology piece and got them to 96% while taking 22% out of their inventory. But it all got driven by that one metric of fill. Are we getting that? And everything came in process. And once we had that, then we could look at metrics that would make sense because they're grounded in some kind of reality that we could tie to a process, and that people understood if I do this, it's going to get that result.
Okay, amazing insight. Thank you so much, Paul, for that. So, Chris, we are probably going to do just a short segment. We are probably going to have 7 minutes for the segment, 6 people, so it's going to be hard.
So a couple comments I haven't mentioned. Yeah, a couple things. As you think about other metrics in this inventory management, around performance and labor and just the operations, I think about rates of return, and you're thinking, okay, well, what's that have to do with operations? Well, then we kind of dovetail back into picking performance and just overall just operations, meaning accuracy. Meaning, what am I measuring? Was it there when I went to where it said it was? Well, there's an accuracy problem. Was the right count there? But again, accuracy in picking. So as we have returns coming back in, we start looking at return rates. We start looking at causes behind returns. And again, am I shipping the wrong products? Or do I have defect rates? And I think that it's another set of analytics that what does that also tell you? Number one is, what's my picking capacity? Do I have too much labor in the warehouse or too little? We go back to cost again. We go back to capital. Just like that corner that has $1 million in stuff sitting there for 10 years. Let's turn it back into cash. But do we need more people, less people? And again, that's another set of analytics. So that's my 2 minutes.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Chris, for that. So Sharon, over to you. Any comments over comments?
Thank you, Sam. I would say that from a higher level view, that when we manage inventory, we need to look at demand forecast accuracy. inventory count accuracy, and then compare inventory turnover rate and the sell-through rate. So those combinations will give you a better picture overall to eliminate problems down the road.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Sharon, for that. Mark, coming over to you. Comments over comments. Any more stories? You are on mute, Mark.
Darn, that's the first time I've done that since about 2 hours ago. Yeah, just a couple of things. Just driving off something Chris said about returns. It's particularly in the e-commerce space, I think, which hopefully Sharon will agree. It's interesting to see how tracking your return. First of all, you have to track your returns against your pick velocity and pack velocity, because they all obviously go together. But how so few companies do tend to categorize the return reasons between we made a mistake and the customer wasn't happy with the product, because they're completely different things. And if you don't track that metric of you can then figure out what the problem was and maybe be more granular about your reasons for returns that are inventory or inventory operations driven. But a lot of companies just don't do that. And one of the reasons for that is because a lot of e-commerce orders are small dollar value. So you can't really justify the human customer service rep time for actually gathering that data. But you're selling online, get the information online. It's a very strange thing. That's my 2 cents worth there.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Mark, for that. Tom, comments over comments? You are on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to get myself off mute. I had found something here.
Now you are on mute again, Tom. Okay, you were not on mute then, but now.
So I don't know if you could hear that. I did find the music for the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, anyway, so no, I kind of harken back to maybe the 2 key themes of my little earlier diatribe. One is the math matters, and you really have to familiarize yourself with your business operations, product lines, supply chain processes, again, to Paul's point, in order to craft the appropriate metrics for your business to drive the right behaviors. And then I think the other thing, and again, it kind of goes back to a little bit of what Paul was saying too, about finding the right metrics, countervailing or complementary or whatever it may be, but that drive the behaviors that you want, not the behaviors that, look the best for the metric for the employee that may be measured, but that actually achieve the end results you're trying to achieve. High customer sat, an efficient, cost-effective business operation, those end results.
Okay, amazing insights. Thank you so much, Tom, for that. Paul, comments over comments. Any more stories?
I'll just, I got a million of them, but I won't go into any more at the moment. I would say, considering all of the pieces here that need to work together, one of the things that really, the one activity that needs to pull all of those together is think. Think about what are you trying to accomplish. Many times I've seen, we did this because we didn't think that X. We thought that Y. We thought, yes, yes, think. But there was a guy named Joshua Reynolds. His statement was, there's no extent to which a person will not go to avoid the real labor of thinking. It's a truism.
Okay, amazing insight there. Thank you so much, Paul, for that. And it's very hard to plan inventory. I guess I suck at it. I was thinking that maybe we'll take 7-8 minutes for this one, but now we are done in 5-6 minutes. So we still have 5 minutes. So we'll do the closing advice. Now you guys can go slightly longer, I guess, for closing advice, but not too long. So Chris, closing advice, please.
And again, decide what metrics you really are trying to control. There's a bunch of important ones: the service impact, the capital impact, the costing impact, and again, make sure the data is right, and use them. and have actionable outcomes when you find problems with them, whether you're adjusting replenishment settings, min maxes, and then you got to measure again, make sure that you're driving it. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Chris, for that. Sharon, closing advice, please.
Thank you, Sam. Closing advice, I would echo what Tom said and what Paul said. Think. All the KPI is trying to change behavior. What are you trying to do? So don't just drill on the numbers. What are you trying to do? That's the key point.
Yeah, thinking is probably going to be the theme for that. So thank you so much, Sharon, for that. Mark, coming over to you. Closing advice, please.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I think the single most important thing that I heard on this was Tom's comment about driving behavior, because, you know, too many people are focused on results, but driving behavior and driving the right behavior will ultimately get you the results. And I think, you know, just avoid, the other piece of advice I give is avoid the temptation to build your KPIs based on what's easiest to measure, in addition to what Tom said about the ones that are going to give you the nice warm and fuzzy feeling because they're going to look good on a regular basis. So, you know, start off with what will help me improve the behaviors and drive what we need to drive, and then work back there to what the metrics are going to be.
Okay, amazing advice. Thank you so much, Mark, for that. Tom, closing advice, please.
Yeah, I won't repeat what I said before. I was kind of giving my closing advice before when I said math matters and the formulas. You know, you really do need to do your homework and understand and get it to fit your business, and then consider behaviors as everyone's now been you know, echoing. Let's make sure that we're driving the right behaviors that deliver the kinds of results we want. But I would maybe add one more thing, and that is attempt to think cross-functionally about these metrics. It's very easy to get locked into your department or your function, and talk about what you can control and feel like, well, I did everything I could. When in fact, you can go outside of the four walls of your department or your function. You can talk to other people in other functions. It's permitted. And you can get some cross-functional alignment on metrics. And, you know, whether that's the sales guys and how they're handling, you know, consignment inventory, or it's manufacturing guys and how they're doing production scheduling, and whether, you know, when you're saying, hey, we need X as an inventory manager, I need X volume of these products from my manufacturing guys or my procurement guys, how they source or how they make, that has an impact on your inventory availability at the end of the day. You know, Sharon talked about lead times. You know, these things matter, and they affect your inventory and your inventory management. So I'd say think cross-functionally too.
Yeah, could not agree more. Thank you so much, Paul, for that. Tom, for that. Paul, coming over to you. And closing advice. I don't know if you gave closing advice as well.
I'm just going to stick with thinking. Right? The behavior change matters. It's the only way you get change in the organization, because otherwise, I mean, you need the behavior change in order to get to that improvement seeking culture. And I'll go back to my original word, think.
Yeah, think is the keyword, guys. So keep thinking and make sure that you are thinking about KPIs. On that note, that's it for today. If you joined for the first time, this is part of our digital transformation series, for which we meet every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. So make sure you guys are going to be here probably next month, because we are probably not going to come back for next 2 to 3 weeks. I'll see you all in the next session. On that note, thanks everyone for tuning in today.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Everybody have a great day.
Take care. Bye-bye.